Joining us now for War Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Robin. I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
Good morning.
Good.
And thanks for yesterday. You guys did well for
OG? Oh, she had a wonderful time, but to be honest, I can't take credit for that surprise. You know, off air, as soon as you guys came off air, there was a beautiful surprise for OG. There was like an explosion of confetti, a saxophonist, all of that stuff. And I think they came from the Delta State broadcaster as a birthday gift to OG.
Well,
so can't take credit for that, but huge thank you to them. Definitely.
Thank you very much.
It's Sammy Ofijoku and team. Sammy used to be of the DBS, but he's retired now.
Wow.
But they have a Delta Broadcasters Conference, which I am also going to speak in, and Audrey is also going to speak in. So they just gave that surprise.
Yes,
yesterday.
well, that's lovely.
Yeah, and it was very pleasant
surprise. It was lovely.
On that day, and we all enjoyed it.
We did.
And you ran away. You didn't even stay.
Friends, we're running out of time for the World Brief.
Let's get into it.
Come on, let's get into it. Good morning to you all. All righty, let me tell you what's happening around the world. Canada is not for sale, says Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney during his visit to the US President Donald Trump at the White House. Let's take a listen to what Carney had to say.
As you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together.
Well, very interesting to see how Donald Trump cowers in the presence of somebody who will tell him to his face that what he wants is not possible. Well, in the press conference following his meeting with Trump, the Canadian Prime Minister did say that Canada must build at home and build with their partners abroad, which does include the United States. Carney also said that Trump is willing to negotiate a new trade deal and drop the tariffs. The pair then went on to discuss the strategic benefits of a collaborative North American approach towards auto manufacturing in the face of competition from Asia. Now, Trump had previously stated that the US does not want Canadian cars. We are on the brink of history. The papal conclave begins today as the Roman Catholic Church starts the process to choose its next spiritual leader in a decision that could shape the future of over 1 billion followers worldwide. Now, following the death of Pope Francis some 16 days ago, the world now turns its eyes to the Michelangelo Sistine Chapel, which is swept for listening devices and sealed shut for the duration of the conclave. Vatican staff and the 133 cardinals all take an oath of secrecy before gathering behind sealed doors to begin this sacred ritual. On day one round of voting is possible, consisting of 2 ballots in the afternoon. And then from day 2 onwards, there are 2 rounds of voting daily, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, Roman time, of course, to be elected Pope, a candidate must receive 2/3 majority plus 1. If no decision is reached after 3 days, there is a 1-day pause for prayer and discussion before voting resumes. Now, let's move over to Africa. And we are looking at fires and explosions rocking Port Sudan as paramilitary forces launch drone strikes on targets, including the airport, the port, and a hotel, causing blackouts across the country's wartime capital. Now, thick black smoke could be seen at dawn on the skyline of the previously safe city where thousands of people are fleeing the 2-year civil war. They had sought refuge in Port Sudan. Now, on Tuesday, Sudan's electricity company said it was assessing the damage on its substation, which has disrupted supplies of water, health, and other services. Now, the drone attacks appear to have disrupted air traffic at Port Sudan's airport, with 3 flights from Cairo in neighboring Egypt cancelled also on Tuesday. Now, following the drone strikes, the UN has temporarily suspended aid flights to Port Sudan, but regular aid operations do continue. Port Sudan, which has been a destination for those, as I said, fleeing the 2-year war, has been targeted for the 2nd time so far this week. And finally, Nigerians are among a list of countries applying to work or study in the UK, which are now going to be facing Home Office restrictions over suspicions that they are most likely to overstay and claim asylum. Now, 10,000 asylum claimants who had arrived in the UK legally on work or study visas were living in taxpayer-funded accommodation, such as hotels, at some point last year. Data disclosed by the Home Office in March showed that of those asylum seekers who had originally entered on a visa but then ended up in government accommodation, the most common nationalities were Pakistan, Nigeria, and Sri Lanka. Now, according to a British media report, the Home Office is also attempting to build intelligence to enable caseworkers to spot patterns in the profiles of people who are most likely to abuse work and study visas as a loophole to claim asylum. Now, officials will be instructed to use the bank statements submitted by visa holders as part of their assessment when deciding whether to grant them asylum accommodation. Now, there are concerns that such a move may lead to legitimate visa applicants being discriminated against, which is actually something that I can actually give my personal experience to. I do know someone who is a nurse here in Nigeria who applied for a study visa so that she could sit exams in the United Kingdom for a nursing qualification. And she submitted her bank reports, as you do. And she was literally told in her rejection letter that, looking at her bank statements, they didn't believe that she was going there for the legitimate reasons, even though she's a working nurse and has all of the exams books already that she'd already paid for. And they told her essentially that they believed that she was going to overstay. So I do think this is an example of legitimate applicants being discriminated against. Very interesting stuff.
Very sad one. So a couple of things. Where do I start from? Many stories. Let me start from Rome, which you were a couple of days ago. Yes, so we have gotten to a very important and inflection point again with the Catholic Conclave. I remember the last one we had around 2013, and I remember when the word came out, Habiam Papam. Truth has to be said, there's going to be a big fight. And big fight literally means doctrinal fight between the conservatives and the progressives part of the church. But one thing Pope Francis has been able to do is that he's been able to bring in more cardinals that pretty much flock around the progressive, the likes of the Tackles of this world, the Papirinos of this world, and a couple of other cardinals around there. So when the conclave starts, let's see how the voting is going to be, because there's a part of the church, the heavily doctrinal part, the Joseph Ratzinger part, because Joseph Ratzinger, the former Pope, Benedict XVI, was heavy on the doctrinal part. They kept on looking and saying that the Pope Francis opened it too much, but the church too much. But the truth is, it also worked for the church. The church gained more membership, number one. Secondly, a lot of people felt that they truly had a pastor, because the disconnect has always been the pastoral care. Can they really refer to the leader of the church as a pastor? Is it close to them? And in this case, you have a couple of other African contenders, the likes of Toxin of Ghana, the likes of the Guinean candidate and other things like that. So let's see how they'll vote. But I pretty much think after the fact that you had a very open Pope, that spoke and commented and said, who am I to judge about gay marriage and the likes, it's going to be tilted more towards the very doctrinal part, the conservative part of the church at this point in time. But who am I to judge?
We'll find out.
It will only pan out when that voting starts.
Yes. And when we see that chimney smoke.
Not the chimney smoke.
Yeah.
If you see the black, you continue voting.
Yes,
but when we see the white chimney smoke, then we can make that one.
There was a meme where they released an orange chimney smoke because, Donald Trump had posted that AI picture of himself. He
said it wasn't him.
But anyway, let's focus on serious issues today. Sudan. Remember yesterday we had made mention of attack on Port Sudan.
Yes.
And the detail relating to yesterday's story was that these drones are said to be originating from the UAE. They're UAE manufactured weapons. It continues to indict what we saw playing out at the ICC. Although ICC acted well within its rights to throw the case out in the manner that it did, but just a reminder.
The ICJ.
ICJ. Sorry, excuse me. I always confuse the two. I beg your apologies. The ICJ. Again, it's just an indictment of our inability to resolve issues. Al-Burhan is continuing. He has appointed his own acting prime minister and is trying to run business as usual, but you can see that the opposition is stiff for him because now with the new capital or the temporary capital basically trying to be paralyzed now, what is the next move? Very quickly to Canada, what I thought was quite intriguing, although this power play happened in the White House, was the fact that Alberta is coming on strong at their new PM.
Yes.
So they're saying, of course, we know Alberta is a strongly conservative state and has always tried to put a little bit of pressure on their federal government.
Yeah.
But the Premier has come out to say that if the people are able to reach a petition, to reach the required number of signatures on their petition to join the United States as the 51st state, then she will make sure that a referendum goes ahead because she's saying that she's frustrated at the Liberal Dems legislation where it concerns oil production because Alberta is an oil state. However, it has to be said that Quebec has tried to do a referendum to break away twice, and both times it failed. So it's more of a power play. They've got an opportunity to, show a bit of shoulder muscle and try and negotiate the hard way and get what they want. But interesting to see that you have a state within Canada that's saying, no, we're ready to be part of the United States.
Okay. A number of things about Sudan. I made the point yesterday that the International Court of Justice deals with dispute with states. The International Criminal Court deals with
individuals.
Deals with crimes against humanity. That distinction should be restated for our viewers. However, the two major concerns about Sudan is the escalation, the dangerous escalation of the conflict and the humanitarian crisis that can result therefrom. Even now, the United Nations has said, look, this is a dangerous escalation that could have implications. The fact that it is happening almost immediately after you brought the story yesterday about the decision of the ICJ saying that the UAE is not complicit in terms of the genocide in Sudan and West Darfur specifically, I think is frightening.
Yeah,
that,
they don't have the jurisdiction to say that.
That the RAF, now thinks that it can go on the offensive. That's about that. Now, Trump and Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, who has just been elected, April 28, they met. We have heard about this possible meeting, but not much came out of the meeting, particularly in terms of tariff deals. Trump was saying, no, not this time, and all of that. But I think the bigger thing there is that McCartney was able to insist that this was a dialogue between two sovereign states. And he made a point that, look, Canada can never become the 51st state of the United States. Now, okay, I took a course many years ago, American Foreign Policy, the Department of Government and Politics at the University of Maryland. And we were told that conquering territories, colonialism, that's the word that the professor used, Odin Carter III, that it's not part of American foreign policy process. But we have seen under Donald Trump a reversal, a revision of the American foreign policy process. He not only wants to capture Canada, he wants to capture other parts of the world. And I think that, Carney came out looking very well, insisting on the sovereignty of his country. Having, in fact, won that election on the basis of nationalism.
Yes. Because
he told the people his Liberal Party was not doing well, but he told the people that, look, this is Canada, and we will defend Canada. But of course, the meeting is not as bad as the meeting with Zelensky. The other time, they they tried to be very nice to each other. UK overstay concerns. It's not only Nigeria that they are looking at. They say they are going to prepare a white paper before the end of the month. Some of the countries that have been mentioned include Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and all of that.
Yes.
Now, I will just say that, look, Nigeria should take that as a wake-up call to make this country a very comfortable place for Nigerians, young or old, so that people will not be leaving Nigeria and saying they want to go to seek asylum elsewhere. If your country gives you an enabling environment, you will live there. And there are many people who have jackpot. This is the jackpot phenomenon. And they come back and say, look, they think that they have made a mistake because the grass is not always greener on the other side. Finally, the Papa Conclave.
Yes.
Yeah, it has started. It's a secretive process, you know, heavily steeped in tradition. They are starting today a mass at 4 a.m., you know, BST time, I think, and then they will convene at the Sistine Chapel in the environment of Michelangelo's frescoes, and they will, you know, pray, and then they will vote.
Yes.
As you pointed out, the Pope that will emerge will have 2/3 of the vote.
Yes.
If there is no vote, there will be a black smoke. If there is a Pope, there will be a white smoke. And all of us will say, Abemus Papum.
We have...
What does it mean? It says, we have a Pope.
Okay,
But that
we'll
Pope,
be waiting.
that Pope is not going to be Donald Trump.
Oh, I hope not. All righty, let's move on to the papers. It can't be.
That you can be sure of.
That we can be sure of.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
joke.
Let's move on to newspapers.
Either Cardinal Parolin, if I want to...
Pietro Parolin, maybe. Maybe.
don't
Or
go.
even African. We are out of time.
Antonio.
You never know. Let's move on to our newspapers this morning. Let's take a look at this day. This day. Let's take a look at it. And it does lead with concerns over global oil prices floating around $60 a barrel on Tuesday. Now, Nigeria's oil benchmark, Brent crude futures, which is around $75, is actually what Nigeria's 55 trillion naira 2025 budget was built around. So with prices so low, analysts do fear the worst, especially since Nigeria has not been able to meet its crude production benchmark of 2.06 million barrels per day, having only been able to record some 1.6 million barrels per day in March. Now, the new Telegraph this morning has Senate President Godswill Akpabio urging lawmakers to rise up and meet the expectations of Nigerians. He also urged the lawmakers to be guided by patriotism in the discharge of their legislative duties. He said the rising cost of living, the instability in the energy sector, and the persisting insecurity in parts of the nation all demand not just attention, but legislative action. Now, speaking of insecurity and hunger, the Daily Trust leads with how import waivers on rice, maize, and other grains are crippling local rice mills and other businesses. Now, if you remember last year, the federal government did approve a 150-day waiver between July and December for the importation of rice, maize, and other food commodities to mitigate the worsening food crisis. Now, Nigerian Customs Service did say that the waivers have caused food prices to drop, which is clearly a good thing for consumers, but for producers who were previously awash with federal support during the Buhari administration with loans, grants, and waivers, this is a situation that they're not comfortable with. Now, the troubles facing Nigeria's rice value chain is also picked up on today's Guardian newspaper, as its headline says that insecurity and middlemen are driving up rice prices and forcing mill shutdowns. Let's also take a look at The Punch this morning, and it has rising insecurity has caused the National Assembly and ex-generals to demand the urgent rearmament of military as insurgents continue to have access to and use of sophisticated weapons. Now, yesterday, we discussed how Benue lawmakers had been invited to appear before the National Assembly to provide details over the insecurity crises in the state. But according to the Daily Independent this morning, some 1,000 lawyers did gather nationwide under the Save Benue and Zamfara coalition petitioned by the National Assembly to take over the functions of Benue and Zamfara state houses of assembly. Now, the coalition argued that the two houses are unable to perform their constitutional duties due to internal crises and the alleged interference by state governors. Now, the petition claimed that in Zamfara, 10 lawmakers have been suspended since February last year on the instructions of Governor Dauda Lawal for raising alarm over the rising insecurity in the state. And similarly, in Benue, they stated that 13 members of the House of Assembly were suspended for allegedly refusing Governor Hyacinth Alia's instruction to suspend the chief judge of the state. Though the Daily Sun does also lead with insecurity, another story that stood out was the outrage over the massive failure in the 2025 Unified Tertiary Matriculations exams. Out of the 1.9 million students who sat the exam, 1.5 million of them scored below 200, which has raised questions over the quality of education and of student preparedness.
Jesus Christ, Femi. At a time where you're supposed
We
to
are
have
at a
all
time
the
very quickly.
tools,
Yeah.
internet and everything to be able to help them prepare better,
Yeah.
we're having such an appalling result. This is a national emergency on our educational system.
All right.
Yes, we
and all
are.
hands must be on deck, but we need to go.
All right. Adefemi, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
We're going to try this again
We
tomorrow,
will.
and we're going to make sure we review these newspapers fully. All right. Thank you so much. Adefemi Akinsanya.